So you're looking to buy a ship in Star Citizen, and you're trying to make, a decision as to what ship you're going to get. And that can be a very difficult decision. There's a lot of factors that kind of play into, not what makes a great starship, but what makes a great starship for you. Now, we've made a lot of cases for a lot of ships over the years. We've seen, like, these are ships that are just shining examples of great starships. And then there are others that are, they were very early efforts, unfortunately, and there was a lot of mistakes and a lot of assumptions made in kind of creating these ships, and just some things that just didn't pan out. And we know what these ships are. We don't have to go through the list, on a granular level and say, this is bad, this is good. Because in general, there are ships that obviously are going to need major fixes between now and, whenever CIG gets around to it. And there are other ships that out of the box, things like the Carrack, that are really good, really, really good ships, that are just excellent examples of starship design. There are a few flaws and there are a few problems, but there's nothing really insurmountable. Whereas something like, let's say, the Starfarer, I mean, to a certain degree, that kind of represents an almost page one rewrite to kind of bring that ship up to a livable standard. In the most interaction that most people have with a Starfarer in the Star Citizen universe is the wrecked Starfarer that's crashed on the surface of so many moons and planets that you occasionally have to visit for a mission. That's the most that people generally see the Starfarer in game. It's not an unfixable idea for a ship, but it does, it will represent a lot of work to kind of get it up to where it needs to be. But going beyond just looking at ships, you have to ask yourself, what kind of game is Star Citizen going to be? Because originally, in a lot of people's ideas, in their heads, their kind of idealization of what kind of game Star Citizen was going to be, it was very much Star Wars, and I'm not talking about, the flight engine, the controls and all that. And we're not talking, but I'm talking about overall, people were looking at Star Citizen. A lot of people were looking at it like it was going to be a reimagining of Star Wars or Wing Commander, in a much more modern and a much more, realistic setting. And there was a lot of merit to those ideas, and to a certain degree they are true, but the problem is that Star Citizen isn't Star Wars, and it is in fact quite distant from that. What Star Citizen is, I think there's like a perfect image to kind of encompass what how Star Citizen is going to work, and how we are going to interact with the universe. And that really is, this image, ships from the Age of Sail. If you think about a ship in the Age of Sail, let's say you're sailing a ship from Europe to the Caribbean. You would be out there for months making that journey. You would be on a very long journey. Now, of course, in Star Citizen, traveling, across multiple star systems is not going to take months. But if you needed to call for help all the way back to home base, it might take a long time for that message to get back there. And, an equally long time for help to kind of come. You had to be self-reliant back in the Age of Sail. You had to bring all the things that you could potentially need with you, And this is basically where I think that Star Citizen is going to fall. I think that you are going to end up becoming the captain of a ship, and you're going to have to manage a crew. Now, whether that's an NPC crew or a player crew, that depends on availability, convenience. But for most people, I think that generally they are going to be managing an NPC crew for the most part, and they'll be subbing in real players where and when it becomes, viable or when they're available. Now, certain ships, career-based ships, they might have some much more, complex actions. So you may have to hire specialist NPCs for them, or wait for players to manage those things. But basic things like ship defense, manning a turret, these things are all perfectly, NPCs can already do this and already do a fine job with it. These aren't complex tasks, so you can expect that you're going to end up in a place where, almost like if you think about the old, the old RPG game, The Old Republic, or any other games where you kind of build up a party and you manage a party in a video game, certainly Baldur's Gate or something like that. This is probably going to be part of your Star Citizen experience in managing these NPCs, and managing what they do on your ship. Certain functions are obviously going to be far easier to do with another player, but in general, the basic functions like manning a turret and ship defense and basic ship maintenance are easily doable with NPCs. And so this is probably how Star Citizen is going to evolve. To a certain point, game developers, they kind of create a vision for the game and they say this is the way that the game is going to be. But once you put that in the hands of the wider player base, and it has been true of every single MMO and just about every video game that has ever been made, is once you put it out there in the hands of players, it transforms, because the players kind of inform the design and they change the way that the game is played. The developers intend for it to be played a certain way. Players come along and say, yeah, but no, we're actually going to change this. We're going to change the experience. And some developers adapt to this and say, oh, we didn't think of that. And they embrace these things. Other developers kind of dig their heels in and, it becomes very adversarial very quick. I mean, there's always a certain amount of, adversarial relationship between players and developers, but it can be made rapidly worse when game developers are, intransigent, and they kind of look at even the basic realities that, players kind of hand to them and say, this is the way that the game actually is. They're like, well, no, it shouldn't be that way. And so we're making these changes to stamp these things out. And it's like, but this actually made the game better and more fun. But they don't want to hear that, because they have this idealized creation that they don't want to see, changed, even though the change is better than the original idea. Now, when we look at this, the hot fighter, the heavy fighter, the F-8 Lightning, a lot of people are, thinking, okay, Squadron 42, when that comes out, I'm going right to that mission. I'm gonna motor right through that. I'm gonna get that heavy fighter. I'm absolutely going to, I'm gonna earn that. And I don't care what, so-and-so says or such and such says, because it's got small modules. But the reality is you're going to probably end up in something a lot bigger. And you're going to start thinking about that. You're going to start seeing ships in a different way. Even if you're staunchly, into fighters, your perception of the world is going to change. And the reason why it's going to change is this insidious thing that's true of every single MMO, or every single good MMO that's ever been made, is that eventually players get out of the noob area, and what do they want to do? They want to explore these, vast areas that the game developers create. Exploration is often, some people look at it as a career and they think, oh, I'm going to fly around in my Carrack with my scanners and I'm going to explore and I'm going to take that data back and I'm going to sell it. But just the act of, traveling across the world, of seeing the sights in those worlds, it's one of the things that, makes the MMO experience feel much more real. And you're not going to stay in Stanton. I hate to break it to you, but you're not going to stay in Stanton, because there's going to be things in Pyro, there's going to be things in Terra, there's going to be things in Odin, there's going to be things all over the universe that you're going to want to see. And even if you're staunchly pro fighter and I only want to fly fighters, eventually you're going to grow out of that, because it's going to be the most insidious thing that, you're not going to realize that you're changing until you've already changed. It's going to sneak up on you, because you're going to be like, oh man, I got to go to Odin. That means I got to make 8 fuel stops. Well, you know what? I'm just going to get a travel ship. This is how it's going to start. I'm just going to get a travel ship. Just a bigger thing, just to make those long journeys. I'll just get a freelancer, or maybe like a Cutlass, right? That's how it's going to start for a lot of these players. It's going to be just that little thing. Oh, I'm just going to get this just to make those long trips. Then you'll be like, well, now that I'm all the way here, do I want to wait for my fighter to be transported over? No, I kind of don't want that. I don't want to deal with that hassle. So, well, what if my travel ship had some guns on it? What if I did that? Oh, you know what? This is actually pretty good, because now I got a bed, I got a bathroom, I got food. I can bring different armors with me. Oh, man. This is actually really convenient. And then you're going to start to think about, maybe I want to have, certain specific combat fittings for different situations, different enemies that I might face. Oh, with the Vanduul, these weapons tend to work really well. Whereas, with the Xi'an, these weapons tend to work very well. And then you're going to kind of go like, oh, well, what's middle of the road and what works for both? And I can make up for the rest in player skill. And you're going to like, oh, these, and then you're going to end up, like, I hate to break it to you, but even if you're staunchly pro fighter, you're going to end up a starship captain with a crew. And you're going to put NPCs in your turrets when your friends aren't around, and you're just going to go and jam around the universe like that. That is what Star Citizen is going to become. It's unavoidable. Now, the developers might try to throw up walls around that, and, they might dig in their heels and say, no, we believe in starfighter combat, hashtag starfighters matter. But the truth of it is that it's completely unavoidable. It would be like asking somebody in a much more classic MMO to go back to when they didn't have a mount and say, like, isn't this such a better experience? And they'll be like, idealistically, maybe I thought that was going to be a better experience, but truthfully, it isn't. It's an inferior experience, and that is kind of how this is all going to play out. Like, these are your new fighters in Star Citizen. These are your default ships. These beasts right here. This is what you're going to be the captain of in Star Citizen. You can't escape from it. It's true. It's real. Now you might sit there and say, oh yeah, but I got you. I got you, because I'm going to get a Vanguard, or I'm going to get the next, heavy fighter that shows up that has those medium modules, that has that range, and I'll still be a fighter pilot. Haha, got you, man. Well, not really, because you're going to start to run into missions where they're like, hey, we need you to bring a little bit of cargo from here to there, and you're like, damn, I do need a little bit of cargo space. Maybe I got to step up to that Redeemer. And then all of a sudden you're a starship captain again, because you got a crew, you got NPCs in your turrets, you got maybe one guy floating around inside your ship for ship security to make sure that those nasty players aren't sneaking aboard your ship. That's basically how this is going to go, right? Like, you see that little guy there running around in his underpants. He's going to be trying to sneak onto your ship. You're going to need somebody to make sure that doesn't happen when you're not at the landing pad or at the landing site, things like that. This is what's, this is what it's going to be. Right? So in a weird way, like, I remember, like, even way back in the day, people are like, oh my God, this is going to be like the perfect Star Wars like MMO. And realistically, it isn't. This is going to be kind of more akin to Star Trek than Star Wars. Very much so. If you're looking for Star Wars, Squadron 42 is the game for you. But if you're looking for, Star Wars in Star Citizen, you're not going to find it. You're going to find Star Trek. You're going to be the captain of a ship, and you're going to have a crew, whether that's NPCs or whether that is, just, your buddies in the virtual space, that's how that is basically going to work out. And CIG might come along every once in a while and try to, shift that. No, fighters matter and all this stuff like that. But the truth of it is it's inescapable. The nature of the universe that they're building makes it unavoidable, unless you were to completely rewrite quantum and interstellar travel and how those systems work. And even then, just the limitations of what you can bring with you on like 99% of fighters will immediately just destroy them. And that's what that's how it's going to play out. I mean, you can hold on to your fighters because that'll be a nice thing to put an NPC in and have him follow you around and kind of provide protection from time to time. But then even then, the limitations on your travel, you're gonna kind of push that aside. Unless you're flying an Idris or a Kraken, you're gonna be like, The closest thing that you'll get to it is maybe the snub fighters that you can carry potentially on a Carrack, but certainly on a Constellation. That's pretty much really those are probably going to be the fighters that you see most of, unless you really start to, or NPC piloted fighters, because most players are going to age out of those things really fast. And that's, kind of when you go to these virtual trade shows and you go and you explore around, you're very quickly going to realize that there are just sections of ships that they love to put on display that just are completely irrelevant in Star Citizen. Unfortunately, but ultimately that is how this is going to go and how this is all going to play out. I make these predictions. Some people agree, some people disagree, but trust me, this is the way that I definitely see it going. Unless once again they made some major changes to Star Citizen, this is how it's going to end up. So polish off your uniform, Captain, because you're going to have to manage a crew.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.